Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Today we're going to talk about something that was suggested to me by a viewer in Australia. Gentleman named Steve wrote to me and said, Steve, I'm curious if you've ever dealt with a case of fuel contamination damaging a vehicle. Here in Australia, one of my friends bought a new diesel pickup truck, which he absolutely adored. And he tells a story about how the guy takes his low mileage diesel pickup truck in, gets a tank full of diesel fuel, driving down the road, and the truck starts running very, very poorly and then conks out. And so he takes it to a dealership where they say, oh, we got bad news for you. We've checked your fuel and it's filled with some kind of contamination. It's not good diesel fuel. So he finds out it's going to be an extremely expensive repair bill. He then goes back to the place he bought the fuel at, and strangely, they're doing maintenance on the diesel pumps now. Unrelated, of course. And when he tells them that, hey, I bought a bad tank of fuel here the other day, they say, oh, do you have proof? Do you have your receipt? He said, no, I paid cash. And I said, oh, get out of here. He then contacted his insurance company, and eventually a lawyer was involved. Imagine that. And he says that he eventually got his money and got compensation for this. But he said it was a real pain in the rear end. So the question was, have you ever had to deal with fuel contamination? And if so, how did it turn out? And also, as a fellow Steve, I must ask, are you a V or a PH? And to get to that question first, as God intended, I use a V. I've had a court reporter ask me, what's your name? I go, Steve Lehto. They say, is that a V or a PH? There's only one way to spell Steve. He says, isn't your real name Steven? I go, no, my real name is Steve. I just asked you to call me Steve. They say, yeah, but you spell Steven with a V, a PH? And I go, I don't care how you spell it, because that's not my name. My name is Steve. They say, what's on your birth certificate? And I go, who cares? We're not talking about my birth certificate. We're talking about my name, as I just introduced myself to you, and it's Steve. But I digress. Yes, I've dealt with fuel quite a few times in my practice, and I've also written about this before, but not done a podcast on it. I wrote an article for Jalopnik, and it may have been the first article I ever wrote for Jalopnik, or one of the first. I'll put a link to it in the comment section below. It got over 250,000 views. And it's kind of strange, but in this day and age, once in a while, someone calls my office and says, "Hey, Steve, I just got a tank full of bad gas someplace, and I bought the gas. Car started running poorly. Took it to a mechanic. The guy goes, yeah, there's water in your gas tank. So much of it that I'm guessing it got put there last time you filled up." And the strange thing is that this happens more often than you care to think about. It's scary. But if you just simply run, water in gas news reports, you'll get all kinds of stories from around the country. And it happens. And I don't know why it happens, but once in a while, an underground storage tank that's filled with fuel somehow gets a lot of water in it, and somehow the water gets pumped into cars. I'm sure somebody in the audience can explain that to me. But the point simply is this, that you've bought a tank full of something that wasn't gasoline or wasn't pure gasoline, and it damaged your car. What's the solution? Well, as you can imagine, you have the right to then go after them to make them pay for the damages. And that's going to be true in most states, simply as a matter of, I guess, contract law and negligence. Depends on how you want to look at it. But the point is, you bought something, it wasn't what they claimed it was, and therefore you got damaged, and they owe you damages. The tricky part, of course, is proving it. And that's where this often falls apart. I've spoken to people in the industry who've told me that once word gets out that a gas station over here was selling bad gas, and anybody who bought gas there in the space of 24 hours may have gotten a tank full of water, people will just go over and say, hey, yeah, it happened to me too. Yeah, it happened to me too. So the first thing they obviously ask you for is, do you have a receipt? Do you have a receipt? And my number one piece of advice to you, and to those of you who read my Jalopnik article, obviously, and by the way, if you want, you can stop watching in about 30 seconds after I say it, is get a receipt every time you buy fuel. Okay, get a receipt. Now, people say, Steve, I buy with a debit card, credit card, whatever. I get this bank statement at the end of the month that shows who I bought fuel from and what date. And I say, yeah, but does it show you which type of fuel you bought? Does it say you bought regular? Does it say you bought the super deluxo? Does it say you bought diesel? Does it specify that on your bank card receipt? So it might not. And so my number one piece of advice, and by the way, I got a ration of grief about this because people said, Steve, you're insane if you actually think someone's going to get a receipt every time they buy gas. Well, I'm not insane, and I get a receipt every time I buy gas. And it's very easy to do. After you pump the gas, you can, if you've used a card, press a button. Do you want a receipt? Yes. It spits out a little piece of paper for you. Now, if you pay cash, it's a little trickier, but if you pay cash, you got to go inside to hand them the cash. Ask them to hand you a receipt, and they will. Okay? Because the difference is that the receipt shows right on it what and when and where and so on, what you bought. So the receipt I'm looking at right here says welcome to, and it gives me the name of a gas station. Gives me their address and the city they're in. It says that on this particular date at 9:44 a.m. at pump number 5, I bought 13.297 gallons of gasoline at this price for a total price of this. Paid for it with a debit card, which was approved with an authorization number, blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Please come again. But the key is this shows not just how much I spent and the day I spent it, but it also shows what grade of gasoline I bought. Because most gas stations will have 3 grades of gasoline and possibly even diesel and maybe something else, who knows. And those things might be stored in different tanks underground. And while one tank might have water in it, the other tanks might not. In fact, they probably don't. Just the odds are against it. So when you wind up with that bad tank of gas or fuel and you want to prove it, the easiest way to prove it is with the receipt. Now, if you don't have a receipt, you can still do it. You can still pursue it, but it's harder. It's going to be a proof problem. That's all this is a proof problem. So if it happened to you and you had no receipt, okay, I'll tell you right now, you can go to small claims court and file that lawsuit. And you can testify and say, I bought gas on this day. I paid cash. A little while later, this happened to me. And you bring the mechanic in who says, yeah, the guy brought the car and had water in the gas tank. And if the gas station owner gets up there and testifies, says, yeah, Your Honor, we were selling gas that day that had water in it. Got a couple hundred complaints, but I don't think this guy bought gas there. Well, the judge can pick a winner and see who wins. But you can imagine how much stronger of a case it would be if you had this little piece of paper. And in fact, chances are it wouldn't go to trial if you had this little piece of paper. Because of all the cases I have filed involving bad gas, and I think I filed 3 and possibly 4 in my career, never once has one gone to trial. They settle. And I don't know if it's the insurance company settling or if it's the gas stations hiring their own attorneys and something. I don't know. I don't care, actually, as long as we get paid. I don't blame the money. So the interesting thing is, what happens to you if you don't have this? How do you prove it? And I can tell you right now that people do make mistakes, okay? A friend of mine bought an RV, which went against some advice I gave in an earlier video where I said don't buy an RV. But the guy bought an RV and it was a diesel-powered RV. And he goes, up north one time and he's coming back and he swings off one of those big gasoline plazas and he pulls up and he fills it up with fuel and he drives off, and down the road a little ways, the engine dies and he can't get it restarted. And his first thought is, I just put fuel in this thing. I bet I got a bad load of fuel. And so he calls the gas station back and says, guys, I just got a bad load of fuel from you guys. Have you had any other complaints? And the guy goes, no, we've had no other complaints. What'd you buy and where'd you buy it and so on. And specifically, he's asking where the pumps are and so on. And it becomes very quickly apparent that the guy had put regular gasoline into his diesel tank for his diesel engine. Diesel engines don't run on gasoline. They run on diesel fuel. And it's something that can be done by accident if you're not paying attention. And this is a problem. And I had an Army truck for a few years, an M35 deuce and a half, M35 that I loved, but it was a multi-fuel, but primarily I ran it on diesel. And I remember pulling into gas stations looking for diesel pumps. And it's one of those things that if you own a diesel, you think about all the time. But if you don't drive one regularly, you find yourself going, oh, wait, that's right, I gotta pull up the diesel pump. And by the way, on that vehicle, the tank was on the other side. I had to remember to pull it in that way. But the point is that when this guy calls the gas station and says, I think I got a bad load of fuel from you guys, they pulled it up on the videotapes. They go, we got a video of you right here, and you appear to have pulled up the gasoline island. Gasoline islands are over here. Diesel islands are over here. Just pulled up the wrong island, probably out of habit, because he has a regular car that's not a diesel. So gas stations might have videotape of what happened. They might not. But they will certainly have records of all the transactions. But again, if you paid cash and didn't get a receipt, there's not going to be any way you can prove it. So get yourself in the habit of getting the receipt. Like I said, I brought this one inside today. It was out in my truck. I get the receipt when I pump the gas. I throw it in the little thing in the middle console there. That's what it's for in my truck. And next time I get gas, a couple times later, I clean all that junk out, throw it away, grab the new one, throw it in the truck. I've always got the most recent receipt in my truck. Uh, it's never happened to me, and I understand that I'm a little more paranoid than the average person because I'm an attorney. Okay, and it's kind of like if you're an emergency room physician and you saw all kinds of car accidents, it'd probably make you a little more leery of traveling by car or driving by car. Take your pick. But I've seen this happen to other people. In my mind, it is so easy. Stick the card in, take the card out, pump the gas, get the receipt. I'm on my way. I added one transaction there, which takes up very, very little time. So you may as well just get in the habit of doing it because someday it might save you a bunch of money. And it can get costly depending on what we're talking about here. So, like I said, it happens more often than you think. Do a quick Google search on contaminated gas or water into gasoline news stories, and you'll get stories all over. And like I said, if they've got a tank full of water or a contaminated tank in the ground, and how many people do they sell gas to in one given day? The numbers can be quite large. And obviously, it's limited to that region because that's going to be people who went to that gas station that particular day. But it's like anything else. It could happen to you. So, one last comment I got to tell you, Suomi on my shirt, Suomi is the Finnish word for Finland. But in this case, the shirt actually says Suomi College, and I've had people ask me about this before. I've mentioned that I've had ancestry going back to Finland. And when many of the Finns came to America, some of them founded a university in northern Michigan called Suomi College. It's now called Finlandia, but back in the days it was called Suomi College. And my grandfather was the dean of the school for many, many years. So if you're in the Upper Peninsula and you know about Finlandia University or Suomi College, that's my connection. That's why I wear the shirt. Otherwise, questions or comments, shoot them to me in the comments below. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.